This is assignment 4.3, the data collection techniques. Research is split off into two different sections. It's got designs and the methods. So the designs are like your experiments and things, and the methods are like the qualitative and quantitative data, and how you're actually going to get that. The design is just the sort of experiment of the way you're going to do it, and then the method is actually completing it and going into more detail. But deciding the best research design, there's lots of different types of this, and different designs give different data. Some of them are descriptive, some of them are observational, and then some of them are more like experimental and need certain variables to be controlled. So this just helps you be more specific, so you can measure what you want. Descriptive and observational, you won't have that sort of control, so it will give much different data as if you were to control all the variables. We've got the different types of research here. We've got experimental, correlational, cross-sectional, case study, comparative, and longitudinal. So the experimental design is when you control all the variables except one, and that's the one you're going to manipulate in the study. And then you just see how all the control variables affect the one, your dependent variable. Your correlational one is you're just looking for a sort of pattern between the data. So this, if you put your data into a graph, you just look for a pattern, so you can have a positive or negative correlation, depending on what data you get. The cross-sectional is where it looks at broad populations, which samples are then taken from. These samples include everyone to represent the population. That's known as a cross-section. The case study this is when you look at small groups or a singular person, and it gives details and lots of in-depth information. It shows development through time, because it's a long study. It can be done over many years, looking at just a few people, and you're just looking for developments, changes over time, and the effects of that. Comparative is just pretty self-explanatory. It's just when you're comparing two or more things. A longitudinal study, again, kind of in the name, it's a study carried out over many years. It's, again, just looking for changes over time, similar to a case study, but can be done on a larger scale. And then we go into the different types of data. So we've got our primary and our secondary. Primary is when you've collected it yourself and you get it through your own designs and methods, and it's useful because you can control your own variables and you can design it exactly how you want it, so you can have it very specific, but it does take a very long time to do it because you have to plan it all out. Pilot studies are also a good way to test if it all works and getting your own data. Secondary is when you just get it from a different source. You'd have to credit it in your research, and it's very easy to get to, so it's very easily accessible. And because the ease of access, this allows you to compare it to more than one set of data, so you allow for much more comparative research. It might not always be credible though, because you don't know how it's being carried out, and that then therefore affects the quality, so you don't know how truthful or the ethics behind it all, which is always useful to know, which you would know in your primary research because you've done it yourself. So then we go into interviews here. This is a qualitative method. This is when two people meet face to face. An interviewer and a participant is two people, and the interviewer conducts the interview and asks the participant the questions. There's different types of interviews. These are structured, semi-structured, unstructured, and focus groups. We're going to look closely at those in a minute. But we've got the different classifications of the data as well. So different types of research obviously produces different classifications of data. So some of them are more quantitative and qualitative. They can be different depending on which one you do. There's lots of different classifications of data here. We've got nominal. Nominal is named categories. This is just put into categories such as male, female, tall, short. And it's a simple tally just to give frequency, but it only gives you the value of the smallest and the largest. It doesn't give you the values in between. We've got discrete, which is only separate, isolated, or opposite values can be achieved, and this is done through closed questions. And then we're going to continuous data, which is has numerical value with any number of decimal places, so it can be any number you want. It has two branches here, which are ratio and interval. So the ratio just shows the difference between certain things, and interval has just equal gaps in between. And then we have ordinal data, which is just rank ordered. This is similar to the nominal, in which case it doesn't give you the people in the middle. So it's smallest to largest again. And now we're going to look closely at the different interviews here. So we've got structured interviews. Structured interviews are where you have a predetermined set of questions. The interviewer is going to sit the participant down, it's going to ask them the questions, they're going to go through it question by question. There's no deviations from that, it's just set in stone. And we've got some advantages and disadvantages here. The interviewer can get the relevant information they need for their study. So there's no unnecessary information needed, they just know what they want, they can go straight in, ask the questions, get the data they want and leave again. And it's very easy to stay on topic with this as well, because you won't have any room to ask extra questions. And it's very, very quick as well, because you already have the questions set out, and you just go through them one by one. So they answer, and then it's finished very quickly. However, because of this, you don't get any depth from the data, because you're not allowed to ask why. If they give you a one-worded answer, you're not then allowed to ask why or go more on what they've said. It can also lead to interviewer bias, which is just where the interviewer interprets the data if they can't get the why. And then also social desirability from the participant. They may give the answers that may seem socially acceptable, or that they know the researcher wants to hear. We've got semi-structured interviews, which is like structured interview. You have some questions set out, but you don't write every single one, and you have a few questions you're going to ask, and then you can branch off from each of those questions to get the information you want. And this obviously allows for more depth, because you're allowed to ask the why. You're still able to stay on topic, because you still have questions to bring you back, and it still gets the relevant information, because you still have those questions set out. And this is really good for building rapport, which is like a conversational sort of style where it flows easily, and you can it allows the participants to feel more comfortable and more trusting. So, and it's going to obviously increase the validity, because they're going to trust you and they're going to want to give you the correct answers, because it's similar to a conversation. But it's because you don't have all this questions set out and you can branch off. It's a longer form of interview compared to the structured one, and it can go off topic because of that. And we've got unstructured interviews, which there are no questions set out. It's just you sit down, you ask the questions, and this allows for a lot of detail, a lot of depth, because you can think on the spot, and it's like a conversation again, so it's very easy to build rapport. Flexible questions to fit around the participant and their answers, and you can ask a lot of follow-up questions if they don't give you the longer answer that you wanted. But because you have no questions, it's very likely to go off topic, and if you're trying to build rapport and it's like a conversation style, it's very easy to just drift away from that. And leading questions can be asked as well, because you don't have any set questions, so you can lead the participant to answer how you want them to answer. And again, we've got interviewer bias, and you don't always get the relevant information required, because they might not quite understand what you're asking, you might get a bit confused. And because you have no questions set out, it's going to take the longest. And we've got a focus group. A focus group is when a group of people are just sat down, they're given a topic or a question to answer or talk about, and then they kind of just bounce off each other and give the answers that you want. It's like a conversation between a group of people discussing a topic, and it will have one person, obviously the interviewer, who will give the questions and sort of try to control the group. And it's an advantage. We've got advantages, so it's a lot of discussion on subjects, so it gives you a lot of like rich data because you have a lot of people just having a conversation, just talking about lots of things. And it's a very quick way of getting data because you can get a lot of opinions at once rather than sitting one person down at a time. And again, allows for flexible questions. You can sort of bring them back and just ask them why they said that or why they thought that. And you're more likely to be able to discuss sensitive topics because there'll be lots of people there. Lots of people have different opinions, and you can discuss that, and they can all share their thoughts on that. However, with focus groups, some people might be more extrovert, some people might be more introverted. The extrovert people are more likely to sort of lead it and talk more and be very, very opinionated, whereas the more quiet introverted ones might not be able to say as much, and that's where the interviewer will have to have a lot of skill and have to be trained well to have everyone have their own speaking time to say what they want. And because there's going to be lots of people there, it's obviously going to lead to social bias, so they're going to want to give the answer that they think everyone will think is acceptable. And because it's conversational style again, and there's a lot of people, it can go off topic very, very quickly. And then we're moving on to observations, which is a systematic data collection method that involves closely monitoring someone's behaviour, body language, and interactions in a natural setting or a naturally occurring situation. And the different types of observations are covert, overt, participant, and non-participant. So a covert is when they don't know that they're going to be, the participants don't know they're being observed, and the researcher is hidden. And overt is when the participants know that they're being watched and the researcher makes themselves known to them. So, advantages here, we've got covert allows for much more natural behaviour because the participants don't know about it, so they won't change their behaviour. They're not going to act differently because they know someone's watching. All observations allow for immediate data, and most data from observations can be very detailed, and through this, behaviours can be disclosed that may not have been detected in an interview, so you can read body language and things like that, so you might get different types of information that you wouldn't necessarily get from an interview. For overt, we've got it's less likely to misread signals or body language because you know they know you're watching, so you're being very specific with it. You get immediate data, detailed, and can be used as a preliminary research tool. And then move on to the disadvantages here. With covert, you might misread body language and signals because you're going to be a little bit further away and they're not going to know you're watching, so you're going to have to sort of attempt to hide yourself as well, and you might misread the body language there. And it's very easy to interpret your own views because you're not allowed to make contact with them, because obviously you're meant to be covert. And if you're watching someone, you're not going to be allowed to know the why someone behaves that way, because again, you're meant to be covert. With overt, we have the Hawthorne effect here, where people will change how they behave once they know someone's watching them. And then we've got demand characteristics as well. Ecological validity and realism, and observer bias. And then we've got the participant and non-participant. Participant is where they act as one of the people that they are watching. Non-participant is where they're just on the sideline. Participant, it's more natural behaviour from people being studied, because they don't know about you and you're going to be covert participant. It can lead to a better understanding of the participants and the situation as well, because you're going to be a participant, you're going to know what it feels like, you're going to be in their shoes. It's more detailed and specific because you're going to be closer to the situation, so you can sort of notice those small details that you wouldn't be able to if you were a non-participant. With non-participant though, you can get a wide picture of the whole scene and the situation, and it's much easier to look at the extraneous variables from that and how it affects each person. And through this, it's much easier to remain objective because you haven't had any contact with them.